I used to believe families were ecosystems, self-correcting, balanced, each member necessary in ways you only understood once something went missing. I believed this because it was comforting, and because my father taught it to me in the tone men use when they are explaining facts, not opinions. He spoke about blood the way engineers speak about load-bearing walls. Remove one support, and the whole structure collapses. What he never said was that sometimes the structure is designed to collapse on purpose. Hey, it's good to have you here. Can you please like, comment your opinion, share, and subscribe? I'd love that. Thank you. I was 32 when I learned that everything I thought I knew about my family had been carefully edited. Not lied about, edited. The truth was always there, just cropped and blurred until it resembled something harmless. The first cut was small. It always is. My Uncle Marcus called me one afternoon, his voice tight with a false sympathy that felt rehearsed. He told me there had been a meeting. He told me decisions were made. He told me he was on my side, which was the moment I knew I no longer had one. "You should come by the office tomorrow," he said. "We'll talk." The office had my name on the door, it always had. I had grown up there doing homework at the long conference table, learning the smell of old paper and expensive wood before I learned algebra. The company was family-owned, built by my grandfather, inherited by my father, expanded by me. I had believed, foolishly, that contribution mattered more than proximity. When I arrived the next morning, my name was gone. In its place was my cousin Daniel's. No one explained it. They didn't have to. The explanation was implicit in their posture, in the way they wouldn't meet my eyes, in the way my father stared at his hands like they were foreign objects. They had voted. They had decided. And I hadn't been invited to the table where my own future was negotiated. Daniel was younger than me by 8 years, less experienced, less competent, but easier. He laughed when he was spoken to. He didn't argue. He didn't challenge my father's decisions or ask why certain contracts kept recurring with familiar last names. Daniel was obedient in the way families often reward. I was not. They told me I was being asked to step back. They told me it was temporary. They told me it was for my own good, that I had been working too hard, that stress had changed me. My mother said this with tears in her eyes, as if my ambition were a terminal illness. I nodded. I thanked them. I walked out. It took me 3 days to understand what they had actually done. They hadn't just removed me from the company. They had rewritten the narrative. Emails disappeared. My proposals were retroactively credited to others. Contracts I had secured now bore Daniel's signature. Years of work were dissolved, not with malice, but with bureaucratic efficiency. The most painful part wasn't the betrayal. It was the ease of it. I realized then that betrayal is rarely loud. It doesn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It arrives quietly, wrapped in consensus. It wears the face of people who have known you since you were born. I tried at first to reason with them. That was my second mistake. I spoke to my father privately. I laid out timelines, documents, numbers. I spoke calmly, the way he had taught me to speak when I wanted to be taken seriously. He listened, he nodded, and then he said something that fractured whatever remained of my loyalty. "You're right," he said, "but you don't fit anymore." I asked him what that meant. He hesitated, then sighed as if finally releasing a burden. "You see things too clearly. You ask questions that destabilize people." I laughed because I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. He wasn't afraid of my incompetence. He was afraid of my intelligence, of my memory, of the fact that I could trace patterns others preferred not to see. Families don't exile the weak. They exile the inconvenient. After that conversation, I stopped trying to fix things. Fixing assumes shared values. We no longer had any. I began to observe instead. I watched how my mother avoided me at gatherings, how my sister echoed opinions she had never held before. I noticed how Daniel's confidence was inflated by proximity to power, how Marcus positioned himself as mediator while quietly steering outcomes. Most importantly, I noticed the finances. The company had always been profitable, but suddenly there were losses, strategic losses, justified losses. Money moved through shell entities that shared board members with my uncle's private ventures. Intellectual property I had developed was quietly licensed out, undervalued, then reabsorbed elsewhere. It was elegant and illegal. I didn't confront them. Confrontation is for people who want to be stopped. I started keeping records. At first, it was instinctive. Screenshots, backups, timestamps. Then it became systematic. I mapped relationships, cash flows, decision trees. I reconstructed meetings I hadn't attended by comparing language across emails. I learned which lies were reused and which were custom-built. I didn't hate them while I did this. Hate clouds judgment. What I felt was something colder. Clarity. Revenge is often imagined as an act of passion. In reality, effective revenge is administrative. It took 2 years. 2 years of silence, of being spoken about rather than spoken to, and 2 years of family dinners where my absence was explained as distance rather than design. 2 years of watching Daniel fail upward while my mother defended him with a ferocity she had never extended to me. During those 2 years, I built something of my own, not a competing company that would have been too obvious. Instead, I became a consultant. Quiet, specialized. I worked with firms that had reasons to dislike my family's business practices. I learned their vulnerabilities from the outside. And when I was ready, I stopped being invisible. I filed nothing myself. I sent nothing directly. I leaked through channels designed to look coincidental. Auditors found discrepancies. Regulators noticed patterns. Partners began asking questions. The family called me then. Marcus first. He wanted to clear the air. He wanted to understand my grievances. He spoke as if this were a misunderstanding rather than a coup. I told him the truth. I'm not angry, I said. I'm accurate. He didn't like that. My father called next. His voice was older now, strained. He asked me to help them fix things, to make it go away. I told him no, not because I wanted them to suffer, though they would, but because helping them would mean lying again. And I was done participating in my own erasure. The collapse was not spectacular, no handcuffs, no dramatic courtroom scenes, just contracts dissolving, partners withdrawing, banks reconsidering risk. Daniel resigned for personal reasons. Marcus sold assets to cover liabilities. My father aged 10 years in 6 months. At the final family gathering, my mother's birthday, they tried to pretend nothing had happened. Cake was served. Photos were taken. Smiles were forced into place like masks that no longer fit. My sister cornered me in the kitchen and asked quietly, was it worth it? I looked at her, the way she had learned to survive by aligning with whoever held power, the way she mistook safety for loyalty. I didn't do this to win, I said. I did it to stop losing myself. She didn't answer. Neither did anyone else. I left early. I always do now. People think revenge is about watching others fall. It isn't. It's about reclaiming authorship, about refusing to let the people who betrayed you also decide how the story ends. They still tell their version, I'm sure of it. Families are good at that, but I no longer need to correct them. I know what happened, and for the first time in my life, that's enough. Thank you so much for watching. Do like, comment, share, subscribe, and turn on the post notifications.